James Tallarico continues to perform extremely well in this 2026 Texas Senate race. Now, for many of you, you may consider this a surprise because James Tallarico is running in a state that Donald Trump won by over 13 percentage points in the last presidential election. Back that up 4 years prior, Donald Trump won it by 5.6 percentage points. So in 2024, the state would have you believe that it's shifting red. But James Tallarico, running against a flawed candidate that Trump endorsed, has an opportunity here to upset the odds and win this Texas Senate race, flipping Texas for the first time in a long time here. This is a really good pickup opportunity for Democrats and one that they seem to be very center focused on. The latest poll out in this race for Texas Senate has James Tallarico leading Ken Paxton by 5 points in the latest Texas Senate race poll. Now, this is significant. Texas is a state, like I said before, that Donald Trump won by 13 percentage points. You back that up to 2020, 5 percentage points. If you want to go back even further, 2016, Trump won it by 9%. So significant nonetheless that James Tallarico is able to perform as well as he is in this state. Why? A lot of it comes down to Ken Paxton and his scandals around this race. Ken Paxton was impeached by his own party in the state of Texas. He's the current attorney general of the state. But ultimately, Texas voters are skeptical towards his nomination and skeptical towards him being the next senator from the state of Texas. I mentioned this latest poll. Its Slingshot Strategies has James Tallarico up plus 5 percentage points to Ken Paxton. James Tallarico sitting about 45% to Ken Paxton's 40% in this latest poll. Now, this is really significant because if you go back and you look at these the polling averages, the A2 Insights, that's Tallarico plus 2 back in the end of June, mid-June to the end of June. The New York Times has this dead even, both sitting at about 47 percentage points. A Republican-sponsored pollster has Paxton up plus 1. YouGov Paxton plus 1 at the beginning of June to the middle of June, etc. If you go back, this race has significantly continued to prove that it's going to be close. Everything would have you believe that. The site that I like to use a lot on this channel, and you guys know it very well, is VoteHub. This even has this race as a complete toss-up. The Texas Senate race effectively a toss-up according to VoteHub. James Tallarico about a 45.2% chance of winning to Ken Paxton's 54.8%. If you go back down to VoteShare, Ken Paxton sitting about a percentage point over James Tallarico in the average vote share on VoteHub. Probability, similar situation. However, if you go back to, let's say, July 16th, Ken Paxton sitting at a 60% chance. This has only shrunk in the past few weeks. It's significant nonetheless. You go to, like I said, polling averages. Polling averages in general have James Tallarico up in this race. The betting markets are slightly favored toward Ken Paxton, but James Tallarico is still sitting at about a 47% chance of winning this race according to betting odds. And given this is like a little less than 100 days out from the election. So wonderful opportunity for Democrats to pick up a race that Donald Trump won 4 years ago. Not just won, but won by double digits. If you back that up to 2020, you would believe that this could be a close race because Donald Trump only won it by 5.5 percentage points. But 4 years ago, or 4 years later, in 2024, 2 years ago now, Donald Trump almost winning this by 14%. 2 years later, we're talking about a potential for a Democrat being elected statewide in the state of Texas. Now, another key factor in this is also the fact that Democrats have been outperforming overwhelmingly in key races, including a key state Senate race in the state of Texas, where Republicans were expected to win. They actually lost that race. And nationwide, really, Democrats have performed well over the past couple of years, given this new Trump presidency and how the economy and the war in Iran and these key factors that voters are keeping in their mind, they think that the president isn't focused on them, and therefore they're looking at these candidates that Trump is putting up in 2026 and saying, I'm not sure about them. Ken Paxton being one of them, filled with scandals, running in a state that's expected to be closer than normal, and a flawed candidate. Ken Paxton may in fact lose this race. Another key factor in this Texas Senate race goes back to the House of Representatives, where the Texas State General Assembly has decided to undermine voters and really change the maps in the middle of the decade. We think back to the redistricting in the middle of the decade with Texas and California really fighting this war out, and then other states joining in here lately. This all started in Texas when Donald Trump called Greg Abbott and asked for him to have more seats in the state of Texas. This may in fact backfire, but not backfire on the House of Representatives, but instead losing a key Senate race, a Democrat winning statewide in the state of Texas. That's what we're talking about today. Now, I want to also talk about the 2018 Senate race in the state of Texas. While this was nowhere near the same cycle, although it's similar, it's not going to be the same, and I think many people will tell you that. There is a very significant, interesting thing to point out, and that's the fact that Ted Cruz only won the state of Texas back in 2018 by about 2.6% over Beto O'Rourke. Now, this is significant because Ted Cruz at that time was considered somewhat of a flawed candidate, but nowhere near what Ken Paxton is considered, arguably, in my opinion at least. I would definitely argue that Ken Paxton is this much more flawed, much more scandal-driven candidate in the 2026 midterms than Ted Cruz was in 2018. Also, another key factor in 2018 was Ted Cruz was the incumbent senator. Arguably, statistically, it's harder to defeat an incumbent, especially in a state like Texas. But Beto O'Rourke made this race close. What's different about 2026? Well, candidate quality. Ted Cruz, like I said before, arguably better candidate than Ken Paxton. Some may argue differently than that, but in my personal opinion, and in the minds, I think, of a lot of Texas voters, they would tell you the same thing. A lot of people are very skeptical towards Ken Paxton, and it's proven in these new polling averages where James Tallarico is performing extremely, extremely well. So if it's anything like the 2018 midterms, this race is going to be close, and arguably, I'd say it will be closer than 2018. I think that James Tallarico ultimately has a chance to flip this Texas Senate race, and send a Democrat from the state of Texas to represent them in Washington, D.C. in the United States Senate. With that said, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think this is similar to 2018, where Beto O'Rourke almost defeated Ted Cruz, only losing by about 2.5 percentage points? Do you believe that everybody has this wrong and that Ken Paxton is going to ultimately win this race by a pretty solid margin? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I love reading through those and replying to those. I love respectful dialogue in those. So thank you guys again so much for watching. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.